I am excited about this week's video because I want to bring you along kind of in my head. Bring you along in my head as I'm thinking and preparing for a trip I have at the end of, or basically in September. I'm going to Italy to do an art retreat, to lead an art retreat, and it is July now, and I have been spending a ton of time thinking about that trip and the process, and I wanted to bring you along on it because two things I hope that you'll get out of this video. Just entertainment and to see how I think about a trip, pack for supplies, how I'm practicing with supplies, those kinds of things. So just enjoy it. And then two, I'm hoping that it will also be a help to you to think about trips or outings for yourself. So I have learned because of, was it last year? Those of you that have been here for a while, do you remember when I went to Florida and took like the most ridiculous amount of supplies? So ever since then, I've been working on honing things down. This is a big trip. It's a big retreat. I need a lot of supplies because I'm going to be there for a long time, but I want to know my supply. I don't want to take a ton of stuff. Like, I want to be very confident in the things that I'm taking. I want to know how to use them. I want to know that I love them, that kind of thing. I was thinking about it like this. It's a little bit like a piano recital, a recital for whatever. You want to come prepared. You want to know your instrument, whether it's a flute, whatever, piano. You don't want to get to the recital and sit down at the piano, everybody watching and ready for you to play, and you're like, I don't know where my music is. In fact, I don't even know what I'm playing, and what is this thing in front of me? What are these black and white keys? You know what I mean? Like, you want to sit down and just play that song really well. So let me turn you overhead. I want to take you through some of the supplies I've been thinking about, and then not only thinking about and putting together, but I go out and use them. That is what I think is so important. Think about the supplies and then use them, use them, use them. Practice, 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 and make sure like I'm honing everything in. That's what this video is going to be about. So let me put you overhead and we'll jump into where I am in this part of the process for preparing for the big trip. Okay, let me show you the very first thing that I've been working on actually for a couple weeks now and trying to really figure out. It is the fact that this is the normal watercolor gouache palette that I use, and I've decided that I want a watercolor palette. I mean, I could kind of go into why, but let's just, for the sake of time, I wanted to create a watercolor only palette. I don't feel like I can just use this. I'm really loving gouache, and there's some colors that I can't live without. So I'm going to show you in just a minute the watercolors that I have narrowed down on here, and I think I want to even narrow down even more because I think there's some of the colors on here that I can make. I'd love to get just a few keys on the piano. But I've ordered another palette like this because I love this really thin art toolkit palette, but I think I want to just take this for like the plain, for that kind of travel, but I don't want to have to take a bunch of my tube of paints to fill up the pans, and I like these deeper pans. I think what I want to do is have a watercolor palette, a gouache palette, both of those very limited, and fill them to the brim and not take any extra tubes. So that's the plan. I've got my extra pans here for my gouache. I've been narrowing down the gouache that I want. So someone might ask, why would I not just combine like my watercolor and gouache paints into a larger palette like this? Because I've got a couple more palettes that are quite large and would fit all of this together. But what I have found, because I've actually done that before, what I have found that happens is then basically my watercolors become gouache because I like contaminate them, and I really wanted a clean palette of watercolor that just all the paint stayed fresh. I wasn't dipping in this and like in my white and then into something like this, because I totally do that. What I found is with two palettes, I will mix here, and then when I feel like I need some gouache, I'll mix on this palette. So that has worked well. Then also it allows me to, you know, just use watercolor palette, take one palette out if I want it, because I have been doing that quite a bit, just like grabbing my watercolor palette and painting, just doing quick little sketches with it throughout the day. Like usually at the end of the day, I'll do some kind of quick, very quick sketch and just kind of reminding myself of my watercolors and seeing if I can, you know, like get things down to just one palette or like, you know, less colors. The other thing is, you may be wondering, those of you that are familiar with a palette like this, you may think, how did you get that many large pans, full pans in here? Because the normal palette has a thing like this that you can stick the pans in, but I always pull that out and then use the full bottom. And the way I do that is I use a little bit of this glue. I like the rubber cement, and I'll just put a dab on the bottom of a pan like this and stick it in. You have a lot more room if you do that. Let me show you the watercolor that I've been doing, that I've narrowed down. And again, I may narrow down even more. I've been just playing around with those colors, just kind of reminding myself how to play with watercolor and playing with them with my NEOCOLOR ones, and yeah, just a lot of play. I'm going to pull a big stack here of other play that I've been doing and show you that in just a minute, but I do want to show you and tell you what I've got so far on my watercolor palette. Some of this is contaminated because that's just how it is for me with my palette. I don't mind contamination. This is going to be the very first one. It's just like a, probably one of these yellows. New Gamboge or cadmium yellow pale. I don't mind if it's a cool or warm. Sometimes I do lean more toward a warm yellow, but yeah. This is going to be raw sienna, quinacridone magenta. I also try to use colors on my palettes that I have already on my other palettes, so in my acrylic and things like that. This red is really wonderful. I did have this on my gouache palette. You can either use like cadmium red light or the WINSOR orange red shade. I like that. Underneath that in this palette, I have this because I'll just squeeze, you know, it's basically kind of close to the same color. So there's that color. I like that one too. Both of those are quite nice. Then I've been going back and forth between a burnt sienna and this, this is burnt scarlet. Decided I kind of like that because I liked it for a skin tone, like really fast if I'm in a coffee shop or something. I liked thinning that out. It made a nice skin tone. I also found that with that and just a little yellow, I can make a burnt sienna very easily. This is going to be a cerulean or manganese blue. Then I've got French Ultra, marine blue. You could also use WINSOR blue, green shade. And also instead of French Ultra, you could also use cobalt. Then I had two greens. This is just a nice bright, very fake grass green, which is hooker's green. And then I have Viridian. I'm trying to decide if I want to keep both of these on here. They are quite different. I just can't decide. And then this right here is just a really wonderful brown. You can use sepia, you can use raw umber, anything like that. And then a black, which is quite useful. So that's my limited palette. So let me clear all of this out and show you some things that I've been making with that palette, because I think it's not only important to make the palette, but you need to use it, because this is what I've done. I've made this palette, then I decided I wanted a bigger palette, so I made a huge palette, then I went out and painted with it. It was like way too many choices, very overwhelming. Then I made this palette again, and then I decided that I wanted to make a gouache palette. Let me bring this over and show you some things that I've been doing. So when I made this palette the very first time, I first just was familiarizing myself with how to paint with just watercolor, because watercolor and gouache are different, and sometimes it's just fun to play like this and remind myself, yes, I can be loose. Then I just made this up. No. I pulled up some paintings of mine that I've done from the park and took different parts of it. This is just really cheap paper, very thin. I don't even remember what it is. I have a big stack of it, and It's not labeled, so I don't know what it is, but it's very, very inexpensive, thin. And I do love sometimes how watercolor sits on thin paper. Then that same day that I did this, I was meeting up with my friends Sarah Moore and Emily Powell on Zoom, and we were painting just different things. So I thought I'm going to take my watercolor palette and just my NEOCOLOR ones and really be intuitive and loose, because we were just chatting, painting, catching up with one another. And I did all of those, which was fun. Let me pull over a couple sketchbooks to show you. So I think it's important to not just like take supplies. On this trip, I want so desperately to like really hone in what I'm using, know that I know it well, know that I love it, know that I'm going to use it. I just don't want to take extra stuff. So here I'm just playing with colors, mixing colors. This sketchbook is Crescent. I think somebody sent this to me. So play, making sure I like it. I think I've got several sketchbooks around that I've been just, you know, practicing. Making color swatches, painting things, just like play. This is the painting I did when I went to a coffee shop yesterday with Grady. And I had my bigger palette of watercolors, and it just felt like too much. I wasn't really feeling it that day. I was a little off. I was quite tired. But I just wasn't sure about it. So I thought I need to go back to the smaller one. But that's what's helpful, using it like on location, actually using it in the scenario when there's kind of pressure, when you're tired. That kind of stuff is going to be there for me on the retreat. Like, I'm going to probably be functioning in tiredness, and then talking with people, being maybe in surroundings that I'm not comfortable with or don't know that well, that kind of thing. So I don't want to be uncomfortable with my palette if I'm already uncomfortable in other ways. Okay, I just remembered this. The other thing I did was take out this really large pad of paper, which is, let's see, what is this? It is CANSON Watercolor XL 18 by 24 watercolor paper. It's decently smooth. I decided one day, let's take this out on location with my NEOCOLORS and see if I like doing this big out on location. Can I work with it quickly, or is this just going to be more of like coffee shops and things like that when I'm traveling? I didn't love the experience, but I think part of it is because it was a blazing hot day and there was really nobody there at the park, so I had to like make people up. It just wasn't like packed like it usually is. The other thing I'm thinking about for the trip are sketchbooks and paper. So I want to share where my thoughts are on that. I have ordered some paper I'm going to tell you about, and I also received 2 sketchbooks that I was very excited to try out, and I want to tell you about them. I got them. I'm trying to decide if I'm going to take them on the trip, and I've been playing around with them, so I want to tell you a little about them. So here are 2 sketchbooks that ETCHR sent me. I was very excited to try them out because I've never used this brand before, and I was pleasantly surprised. Let's do this one first. This is their cheaper sketchbook. I feel like maybe is around $30-ish. It's hot pressed. I picked the hot pressed one because I like smooth paper. Now, you can already see that it's a little dirty, and that is because I've been using it. About 7 by 10 basically, and very heavy paper. Cotton, like 100% cotton paper, which a lot of times I don't love that because it's too like absorbent for me. I like a little bit of sizing, but it's really nice. So I have already been playing around with it. Here's where I was playing around. I don't remember which palette. You know, I've gone through, I don't know how many palettes now of trying to figure this out. I wanted to see how the watercolor set on this paper, and I really, really like it. I thought maybe it was gonna be too absorbent and too thick for me, but I absolutely love it. I will purchase this sketchbook again. The other thing I love about it is I love the size. For those of us, a lot of us use these art creation, and this is like the 8 by something, 7 by something. And then this is the, oh geez, I really should be telling sizes, 12 by something-ish, so you can get an idea. I love that this one's kind of in between that, and it's kind of square-ish. Not square, but I don't know. I just really, really like the size of it and the shape, so I was quite excited about that. So this right here is done just with my watercolors. I sketched out first. I don't usually sketch out with a pencil, but I do like when marks like that are left. And then this is one where I used my watercolor gouache and also my NEOCOLORs. Can't remember if I used NEOCOLOR 1 or NEOCOLOR 2, but it doesn't really matter because they both just sat beautifully on this paper. And one of the ways I decide if I like a paper, when I'm working with it, if I feel like I'm fighting it or it's like kind of annoying and getting like on my nerves, I shouldn't be thinking about the paper is what I'm trying to say. Like you shouldn't be thinking like, oh, that's irritating the way it's not soaking in, or it's soaking in too fast, or I can't get that to spread, or whatever. I just was able to create and I loved it. I also took it to the coffee shop one day with me. It was really hot. Grady and I went to a coffee shop and I did this there, and I did it with my watercolor gouache palettes and color pencils, and I think some NEOCOLORs. Yes, some NEOCOLORs also. And I really felt like this was effortless. I enjoyed the whole process. I wasn't fighting the paper with the watercolor or the NEOCOLORs or color pencils. Everything just went down really wonderfully. Do I have any more? Oh yeah. One night before dinner, I sat down with, again, my new watercolor palette and some NEOCOLORs and did this, just a really quick, simple sketch. And then I took it to another coffee shop on another really hot day. I really like how this turned out. Oh yeah, we were waiting for the car to be fixed and we had breakfast and I sketched, and I really love how this turned out. Again, using the same things, very small handful of color pencils, my NEOCOLORs, and my watercolor palette. I need to practice those things out in real life so I have all the normal real life pressures. So instead of just in the studio, because in the studio is not how I'm going to be painting when I'm on vacation. Is that it in here? Yes. So I think I may stop sketching in this because I think that I'm going to take this one on the trip. I think it could be a nice layout and format for either coffee shops or, you know, when we're in restaurants, but also for the landscape, I think, because I often have things here in the landscape, but also want to capture the sky. And so I think this could be a really nice format. I don't want to take too many sketchbooks because I do want to just work on loose paper. I've been doing that more and more, but I do think I will want some sketchbooks. Okay, let me show you the other one. Now, I'm just going to tell you, this is not a cheap sketchbook. This is like, ask this for Christmas, somebody's got a special gift they want to give you kind of sketchbook. You know what I mean? It's hot pressed. It's called their Perfect Sketchbook Series. Super nice, thick, really thick, 100% cotton paper. And it comes in this really nice box, which is super nice because I will use these if I'm traveling, like to to wrap it back up in this and put it in the suitcase, hello, and even like this. So it feels like you're opening a very fancy package. This is how it comes. Here's the information. Now, I know some of y'all, when you look this up, are gonna say, that's just crazy price, and it is. It's like $70, I think, but this is like a high-end sketchbook. Now, I will tell you, I do often have trouble, you know, like, I get that, like, if you have something expensive, it feels hard to use. But I just am kind of under the thing of, like, you've just got to use your supplies. You just do. This has got the nicest cover. Can't remember if it's real leather, but it feels like leather. And I'm talking thick paper. I often do not like super thick paper because in the past when I've used it, especially with watercolor, the color sinks down into the paper and it's not as vibrant. It's more vibrant if it sits on top. And this paper is just absolutely wonderful. I will say, I felt like I was fighting it maybe a little more with the watercolor. It's still beautiful. It's very vibrant. This is done with the watercolor and NEOCOLORs. It's nice and smooth. But where I felt like this paper for me shined was when I used my acrylic paints on it. And I'll tell you why. So this sketch right here was done, obviously, using this sketch right here as a reference. Let me also show you this. This more expensive one is just a little, can you see that? Just a little bigger on the edges. It's not way bigger, but just a little. And I love the size of it too. I just loved it. And I loved painting on this paper. I just didn't even think about it when I was painting. It just was wonderful. The pages don't curl up. It just was really beautiful. And it feels like a nice place to capture like important things. So like a trip, whether they're great sketches or not, it just feels like it could be nice to have just my travels, you know, some of my travels in here. And it's these deckled edges, which, I mean, a deckled edge is just so nice. This one right here was done just with acrylic paint. Oh, here's the point that I wanted to make. So I already use acrylic paint that's a little bit matte. The LIQUITEX soft body is matter. It's not full matte, but it's like satin, so it's not glossy. And then when you put it on 100% cotton thick paper like this, there is kind of a sinking in, and so it's just not shiny, which means when you close it up, it's not going to stick together, which is nice because usually what I do is stick pieces of paper in between, and with this I will not have to. I love that this 100% cotton paper just really took this paint beautifully. So very versatile. There's a lot of pages and there is something just nice about treating yourself, and these kinds of books can either make you feel nervous or make you feel rise to the occasion and paint something special and nice. Oh yeah, this is one of my other palettes that I made. This was the more extended palette, and then I took a bunch of those colors out. So I would highly recommend these, either one of these, and I will likely be purchasing both again. I will say this, every time that I've gone to open one of these and flip back through, it is such a nice quality of thick paper that it just has a wonderful experience about flipping the pages. It feels like a really, really nice high-end book. And though these are just quick sketches, there's just still memories attached with them, which feel important and worthy of, yeah, the time and the money, and the fact that it's a nice experience to paint in means a lot to me. So thank you, ETCHR, and thank you for these wonderful sketchbooks that you make and offer to us. So I bought these two things of paper. I have not used, well, I've used these brands, but not this size, maybe not this exact texture. So I got two very different types. This one is obviously Strathmore drawing. You may think, why are you going to take drawing paper to paint on? It's very smooth. It's 14 by 17 inches. And it is thin, but it's not too thin. It's got a nice weight to it. Probably feels even a little thicker than like my Art Creations sketchbooks. It's not white, but but it's not crazy cream either. It's got this perforated edge, and I just feel like the shape is really nice, the shape and the size, because it's not ginormous, but I can get some nice brush strokes in. And if there's things in the foreground I want to capture and the sky or foreground and buildings, whatever, I've got the room to do that. Because for me, on these kind of trips, it's all about just getting like all the information I can. So I feel like this is a good size. Plus this will fit in my suitcase well, and others that like want to buy some of these paintings while we're there, I can just tear it off and they can get this back home safely. This kind of paper too is really wonderful for paint. I think people underestimate how much paint you can put on thin paper. This paper is new to me also. I mean, I've used CANSON before. Maybe I have. No. I have used this Bristol in smaller paper, but again, it's this 14 by 17 size that I'm excited about. Let's see, what's the weight? This is 100 pounds and the other one is 80 pounds. It feels really nice, super smooth. I don't even have to try this before because I can tell that it's gonna be great paper. I'm obviously gonna take some other paper too, my Fabriano. I'll show all of that to you when I actually pack for the trip, but these are my two new papers that I'm excited about. I've been painting on that size paper for a little while. I found an old sketchbook that had that paper that you can tear off. I loved the shape. Again, just doing ducks here, but I could just tell that it was going to be a great shape for landscape. So the last thing I have to really decide is the paint that I'm going to take. I'm obviously going to take acrylic paint. That's what I'll mainly be demonstrating, doing demonstrations and stuff in. The watercolor and gouache will mainly be for like when I'm traveling, or if we're like on a bus going someplace, or if we're in a coffee shop, or even just like at dinner, I may be sketching and I won't bring out acrylic paints. I'll bring that little watercolor and gouache palette stuff, sketchbook, piece of paper, something like that. But for the main painting, I am going to be taking my acrylic paints. I love LIQUITEX soft body. That's mainly what I use. I love the consistency, but it is, I'm shaking it, it's a little more liquidy. So there's part of me that's worried about that for travel. I have taken this before. I took this on my Santa Fe trip, which if you've been following, you know I did a whole online class about it. We filmed for that. In fact, I talked about it, I think last week or even the last couple weeks. Trying to decide, do I want to take some bottles like this, or do I want to take something like this, the heavy body that I can squeeze and either add water to. So I've been trying these out in the studio. I'm not as happy. I like this paint. It's just not the consistency that I'm used to. So that is the thing that I'm kind of in the mode with right now, painting in the studio, using both. I'm trying to, the way I'm doing things is this. I'm painting with stuff like this, like in some of my paint pots. And then I kind of just notice, is this a hindrance as I'm painting? That kind of thing. I have ordered some more of these. I think this would be safer to travel with because it's really thick, and if the like airport baggage people get into it. Oh, that's the other thing. So I'm trying to open this. I'll have to take some pliers also. I mean, Grady will be there. But, so that's another consideration, pliers. You know what I mean? I'm trying to really think about everything. So I'm in that process. So I am going to do a video closer to on like, here's what I'm taking, the whole pack. That's what I'm planning on. Bringing you, like showing you everything. Then we will film, Grady will film, I'll probably film some too, at the retreat. So after the retreat, I'll do a video to show you, you know, a little about the retreat. But for right now, I'm in packing, thinking in my head. It's really fun, like going to sleep at night, just kind of processing and thinking about things. And I want to be real careful to not just start adding stuff. You know what I mean? When I'm packing, like, oh, maybe, like the panic, I may need these. I want to know what I know that I know that I know. Like, yes, I've practiced. I can't add a flute to my piano recital. You know what I mean? Like, it just needs to be the piano because that's what I've practiced. That's what I'm telling myself. So, okay, that's it for this week. I'll see you back here in 2 weeks. Bye.